you.
Well, as the Republican-controlled House gets back to business this hour, what are the chances of a vote on the bill, the Senate bill, today, and is it going to pass? David Drucker, he is Associate Politics Editor for Roll Call, and he joins us now. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Happy New Year. Good to be here.
So just to point out, this agreement, once again, is between the administration and Congress. It was negotiated completely between Biden and McConnell, and the House has not cleared this at all. The House has reconvened right now today and may not even actually take this up, though, or at all. Do you think that Boehner will bring the bill before the House, first of all, and what do you think they'll do?
Well, I don't know if they know yet what they're going to do. What House Speaker Boehner is probably going to do is try and feel out his members and see where House Republicans are across the conference. You know, there's about 230 some odd of them, and I think what the Speaker is going to try and figure out is how many Republicans might he have for the bill in its current form, or does the conference want to try and amend it and send it back to the Senate? You're going to see most House Democrats support this because the administration has said it wants to sign the bill right away. The president has given it his seal of approval. So there are plenty of Democratic votes for this in the House. The question is whether you can get a majority of Republicans. I don't see Speaker Boehner and the leadership in the House for Republicans bringing a bill to the floor that's going to get very few Republicans and pass because of Democratic support. And so they've got to figure out where they are. And then that'll determine whether they bring this up as is, whether they bring it up and amend it, or whether they just outright reject it.
Well, and we just heard Lindsey Graham speaking, and his advice to Republicans in the House was, and this is a quote, to save your powder for the debt ceiling fight. Do you think the Republicans in the House will choose to do that? Well,
that depends. I think Lindsey Graham's advice is actually very prudent because I think that Republicans are going to have a stronger hand to play around the debt ceiling. It's also more of a theoretical thing with most voters where everybody knew their taxes were going to go up and their first paychecks in the new year could reflect that if there's no deal on this cliff that gets to the president and gets his signature. But with the debt ceiling, it's all theoretical about what happens if we don't pay our bills and things of that nature. And I think it gives the Republicans a bit more negotiating room and without the fear of having voters completely freak out on them. So I do think that that's where they're going to have a better chance of standing and fighting and winning something in terms of spending cuts and entitlement reform. Of course, you know, the question there is, what's the president going to do? He has told Democrats in Congress that he will not negotiate with Republicans over the debt ceiling, that he's just going to demand an increase, and that's the end of it. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Well, he's not going to negotiate over the debt ceiling, he says, but has he really negotiated over spending cuts? This bill, as is, a 41-to-1 ratio of, you know, tax increases versus spending cuts. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this bill cuts only $15 billion in spending, while increasing tax revenues by $620 billion. So, you know, given an opportunity, as you said, to put some amendments in here, what do you think the House will go for first if they decide to go that route?
Well, look, it depends on what House Republicans want to do. Are they going to wait for the debt ceiling? Because if they do wait for the debt ceiling, that will be a clash. They will not grant the president the authority to raise the debt ceiling without significant spending cuts and entitlement reform. I mean, that's already, you can see that happening in terms of how that negotiation or non-negotiation is going to go. So the question here is, are they going to try and amend this bill with spending cuts or a higher threshold for the letting the current tax rates expire?
Which do you think they're more likely to do?
Well, I don't think we know. I think that at the end of the day, given how many Senate Republicans voted for this bill in the early hours of this morning, I think there's actually a good chance that House Republicans, you get enough votes and you get this thing through and they decide to fight on the debt ceiling. But if anybody thinks that they're going to, in a sense, cave or come up with a softer position in terms of spending cuts and entitlement reform on the debt ceiling, I think they're wrong. I think that's where you're going to see a real fight.
Yeah, we spoke earlier with Mick Mulvaney, and he was talking about the possibility of adding amendments to it and then going down the road that way. And what would that do to the timing of all of this?
Well, it depends on how long Republicans in the House want to let this bill sit out there for people to see it. They may not act for a couple of days. They may act right away. I think that the reason I'm giving you a lot of guesses is because I think that until House Republicans get together today, really get a look at the bill and really discuss it, it's hard for me to give you some real good educated indications of where they're likely to go. I mean, I could pretend like I know what they're thinking. I can tell you they don't like the idea that this isn't a full across-the-board tax extension. We already know that. We know they don't like the fact that there are not enough spending cuts or any entitlement reform in here, but there are some good things in here that they could probably point to, and there are a number of very conservative Tea Party-affiliated Republicans in the Senate that did vote for this thing. So, in a sense, it's a little bit more complicated in trying to figure out where this thing goes than normal. The one thing I feel like I'm willing to bet a lot of money on is that there will be a huge fight over the debt ceiling increase, because that's where Republicans in the House and Senate are going to demand spending cuts and entitlement reform, and the president is probably not going to want to do that. House and Senate Democrats aren't going to want to do that, and so that's where this is going.
And a lot of tax giveaways in this bill as is, a lot of rate changes as well, so a lot to look at in the next couple hours. Thank you so much, David Drucker. We appreciate